Hey guys, today we're taking a look at the Van Speijk. Probably mispronouncing that, but this is a new premium ship coming into the game specifically for research points. Another tier 9 here coming in, and it's pretty much a Harlem at tier 9. Although you do get some nice benefits here. You get cruiser dispersion, which is a huge benefit since the higher tier Dutch cruisers get battle cruiser dispersion, which makes them pretty inconsistent. And your airstrike here is better in some ways and worse in others. So look at the range. We get 15 kilometers of range. So that red circle on our mini map there is actually the range on the airstrike. So a little more flexibility there, which is pretty nice. And the damage is not too bad. We got 10,000 damage there on seemingly an AFK Jean Bart. That's going to be pretty lucky for us since 32mm armored battleships are going to be the primary target here of an airstrike. Very similar to the Dutch airstrikes that you're going to get at this tier. Similar damage output, although the reticle might be a little bigger. Depending on the stats that I look at, it's either a little bigger or around the same. So maybe a little worse accuracy within that reticle there on the airstrike. But you only get one with a longer reload. That's kind of the downside here. You don't get to save any of them up. Normally on the tier 9, you'd get 2 airstrikes, and that way you could actually maybe hold one in reserve, waiting out a damage control, something like that would be pretty good. But you don't get that here. So a little bit more difficult to use in that case, I think. A little bit less flexible, certainly. As for other things, you're going to gain over the tier 9 or even the Harlem at tier 8, which this ship is certainly based off of. The upper belt is actually 60mm, which is very, very thick. It's going to mean be auto bouncing and shattering a lot of armor piercing and HE shells in this game, and that's really good. But keep in mind the Harlem already had 40mm, I think, or maybe the tier 9. You already have around 40mm on the other ships, so it's gonna do a little bit better, but not all that much better. The deck armor being 30mm does mean you're still gonna get overmatched pretty badly by a lot of the higher tier battleships here, 431mm and above. So it's a little bit tankier, not too much, but you're still wanting to play this island camping playstyle, especially given you need to be using this airstrike on cooldown. At least with the other ones, you have this opportunity of saving up 2 airstrikes for one big blast every once in a while. In this case, you're just wasting the damage output if you have an airstrike available. 7,500 damage there and a fire. It's all right. Nothing too extraordinary, especially considering this is going to be one of the easiest targets you'll ever find, a reversing Jean Bart. It could not get really any easier than an AFK and a reversing Jean Bart here. Against cruisers and DDs, you're just going to miss a lot more bombs and potentially not even be able to lead them, since it is a 15-second lead time, which is very, very difficult to actually land on someone. Our damage, though, is pretty good this game, I will admit. We do get some decent damage, although we do lack battle impact, right? We don't have any sort of radar here, so we're really relying on our ability to deal damage to key targets. And this ship seems to want to just farm out battleships, as we'll see in a little bit. The AP and cruiser accuracy now finally on these guns allows us to do reasonable damage into cruisers, but you do need to look for opportunities to get that off. It's not going to really happen very easily, especially at longer ranges. And if you're playing around islands and that kind of thing, oftentimes you're going to be spamming HE over them since you're going to be at farther ranges, or you're just trying to hit maybe some battleships at longer ranges, that kind of thing. Here we're going to see the armor do a little bit to help us. I still think that the Harlem or the tier 9 would have been able to make this push, but we do take quite a bit of damage, but at least we do manage to live through this here. The Kitakazi certainly wouldn't be taking as much damage as this. The battle cruiser dispersion on the tech tree ships probably wouldn't allow that to happen, or it's certainly more RNG dependent. So that is a nice bonus there. However, I really don't feel like this ship is going to be worth 46,500 research points. Yes, it is much less than the tier 10s, Ohio being around 62,000 research points. You'll get it a little sooner, but you're getting a ship that's a bit of a side grade, really, to the tier 8 and tier 9 Dutch tech tree cruisers. A little better in some ways, although that said, this gameplay footage is before they're changing a couple of reloads on this ship. There you can see that armor piercing doing some little bit of work here. That is certainly a nice bonus of the dispersion again. We always are looking for better dispersion, getting some nice damage in there. Up to 100k now at this point. But onto the changes again. This ship is still in testing, at least when I was playing this. When it comes out on the live server in the next update, which I guess is today when this video is coming out, you'll be able to purchase this ship for 46,500 research points. The reload's going to be a little longer on the main guns. The base reload is 12 seconds here, and it's going to go up to 12 and a half, where the reload on this Airstrike is going to come down. At least the base reload will be 130 seconds instead of 150 seconds. And that's nice and all. I just don't think it's going to be enough to make it a worthwhile pickup. It just seems a little bit too much of a side grade, and honestly, I really do find myself missing out on 2 airstrikes. The 15-kilometer range is good and all, especially because it doesn't impact your travel time or your lead time here. Still have 14 seconds or so to lead these airstrikes at even 15 kilometers. That's nice. But missing out on the second airstrike means you're just more likely to miss, and I don't know. I find these airstrikes hard enough to use already that to put all my eggs in one basket, that at least we get 15 kilometers. I don't know. I'd rather have the 12 kilometers on the base ones and have that extra charge. I think a really interesting idea would have been, instead of taking away a charge and giving you more range, what if we took the range down even further and gave you 3 charges? That might have been interesting, although I guess the Provincian, the dockyard ship from a while ago, already does have that 3-charge gimmick and a very fast reload, although those ones have a tiny reticle there for landing those airstrikes, so very difficult. And overall, I don't really see the Dutch cruisers being played all that often these days. Maybe you guys will have to let me know in the comments below what you're feeling on the Dutch cruiser line. But adding a premium here that's not really adding too much to the line, I don't think it's going to be all that popular. I really don't think so. You're probably better off saving your research points up for something like an Ohio, which is objectively a very, very good ship. There's a few others in the Research Bureau that are very, very strong and not just sort of side grades here. Yes, I will give it that the dispersion is pretty valuable here. Your concealment's pretty nice as well. Just getting a little bit below 10-kilometer concealment, that is very, very nice to have for a ship that does want to sneak around a lot. You are looking for opportunities to push in with these Dutch cruisers. As always, we're trying to get in range with those airstrikes, which this one does give you a little more flexibility. So if you're interested in the Dutch line, maybe you're someone who's found it a little difficult to use these airstrikes, then this one could be an interesting pickup, at least allowing you to get in range a little more often with these airstrikes if you found that a little difficult on the main line. But if you're finding the main line difficult, I do think this one is also going to be a bit difficult to play. One of the other strengths of the Dutch cruiser line, of course, has been its AA. They're pretty decent, although carriers, if they still want to kill you, will kill you. And if you play a little too close to islands, remember your AA really isn't going to do all that much, since they have to have line of sight on the planes to actually engage them. And this ship continues with having good AA. It doesn't quite have the mid and long range AA, but the short range stuff is pretty solid, which maybe makes it even a little better if you're playing close range on islands like you typically are, trying to push up very close to get these airstrikes off, and maybe that's a good thing. That close range AA will protect you a little more if you are really close to islands and the carrier does come after you. So there actually is one more thing that this ship gains over the tech tree ships. So you actually get a reduced fire duration on your ship. You actually have cruiser fire duration instead of this 60-second fire duration that the normal Dutch cruisers have to deal with, which is pretty painful, especially since we no longer have fire prevention for cruisers in the commander skills. Fires do a lot of damage to these ships typically, and the way they kind of counteracted this was giving it the short heal cooldown. So much like Massachusetts, Ohio, Georgia, a 40-second heal cooldown on the tech tree cruisers. That's what you got. And this ship retains that, so you actually have the reduced fire duration, and you still get to keep that heal cooldown, which is very, very nice. So this ship is reasonably tanky. As we can see here, we got up to 2.5 million potential damage. So I do think that little bit of extra armor on the sides Plus, especially the reduced fire duration will help it stay alive a lot more. But that said, in this game, we do end with a loss, and even though we got some pretty good damage, a lot of our damage was into battleships and lower priority targets, really. Ships that aren't really impacting the game quite as much. So I think that is definitely going to be a weakness, and is continuing a weakness of the Dutch line overall. So on to the build that I was using with this ship. We really do just a standard Dutch cruiser build here. We're still trying to buff up our HP as much as we can. Even though we do have some reasonable tankiness, it's very nice to get a little extra health. And the extra healing here on Superintendent, pretty good with that fast cooldown. Concealment, of course, 9.8 is pretty good here. We're also taking top grade gunner. Since again, I'm trying to push up to islands here. It's a very common thing with the Dutch cruiser line in general. So there's usually going to be an enemy ship on the other side of the island I'm pushing up to, or at least we hope so. That's a good way to get off airstrikes and to proc this top grade gunner. It's going to really help us get a little more DPM out of a ship that kind of lacks the DPM sometimes. Focus fire training here, decent for the AA, but really we're focused on that airstrike armament reload time. For 2 points, getting 10% reload on that, it's pretty useful, especially when this line is fairly dependent on getting value out of those airstrikes. If you don't, this line is very underwhelming, and so is this premium ship. Gun feeder's nice, since we do want to be using both shell types. You saw the AP can be pretty useful into some of those cruisers. And then we just take grease the gears here. It's not that amazing, but it does help us with our turret traverse just a little bit here. On the equipment side of things, taking reload, of course. You could go for range, honestly, but you're going to lack even more DPM. And since we have a 15.6 kilometer range here, and then the airstrike has 15 kilometers range, it means we probably are going to be within 15 kilometers of people anyway. At least that would be the goal. So taking reload here seems fine to me. Concealment system, of course, and then I'm even taking airstrike mod. We do lack maneuverability on islands because of that. No propulsion mod does make us feel a little sluggish when maneuvering at slow speeds, but getting airstrike mod is just more DPM for our ship. At least we hope so if we're hitting those airstrikes. We still want aiming systems even with the cruiser dispersion. I always just want more accuracy. Other than that, pretty standard for the other upgrades here. Just quickly, I'll show you the armor layout because it is better, if ever so slightly. Still have the 25mm bow weakness, and there you can see 50mm. I did say 60 in the video. I apologize. I hope I corrected that in post a little bit. But deck armor here, 30mm, so you know, you're still going to be weaker, especially at longer ranges. At closer ranges, though, maybe you can bait people into hitting that. You still don't have the best armor. You're still reliant on some of your healing ability, that kind of thing, to get you out of some tough situations there. 30mm turtleback here means a lot of battleships will overmatch through that, especially the higher tier ones. But it does mean against 406mm battleships, that kind of thing, you're actually pretty tanky. So maybe don't go brawl them, but if they do surprise you, you shouldn't be getting dev struck at least. So that is kind of nice. But again, against Harlem here, the armor looks pretty similar. 40mm, 50mm. It's not the biggest difference in the world. It only matters for a few HE shells in the game. Otherwise, 40mm is more than enough here. Johan also getting that. And the other thing you need to keep in mind, even though, yes, better dispersion is going to always be more enjoyable, you don't have the caliber of guns that the Johan has. So you're lacking on that second flight of airstrikes, which also have a better reload, by the way. You're also missing out on higher caliber guns. So, bit of a side grade? Is that fair to say? Bit of a side grade? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Again, Research Bureau, it's going to be out today, assuming this video goes up on Wednesday. 46,500 research points. Seems like a lot to me, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.